Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff here. Alright, cool stuff to talk about today. You're going to like this. So, yesterday we were talking about feudalism and all these things. So, at the history of the world, you kind of have to figure out a track and how you're going to teach it. So, this course is really designed about how the history of the world has developed who we are today, meaning specifically here in America. So, we're going to focus on the interactions with England because America will eventually become a territory of England. We get a lot of our culture from there. So we're going to talk about the creation of the culture very much in England, which starts with a huge battle. So what we're going to start talking about today here early on is the Battle of Hastings. All right. So the Battle of Hastings took place like 1,000 years ago between England and France. There's an ongoing issue here in this course with the fact that England and France go to war all the time. They always have some type of beef with each other. All right. In 1066, an English king dies. Now, there's the Normans and there's the Saxons, and there's different groups that work together. The Saxons being in England, the Normans being in France. I'm not going to overcomplicate this because while the battle was very cool, there's a ton of really cool medieval battles. The outcome of this battle over a really long time is the most important part of this story. So the Battle of Hastings takes place when an English king dies. All right. There is a king in what is present-day France who thinks he has a right to the English throne. So he'll be able to own France and England. He is going to send an army and invade England. France rarely ever wins anything, which is shocking considering the amount of times they get in wars, but they lose a lot. This is not one of those times, all right? So, and honestly, in this course, this is the only battle / war that France is going to win that we're going to talk about, all right? So, France, they invade England, all right? And here, let me show you a map here if this helps you out. So this here is a map of Europe at the time, all right? This here is France, all right? This here is England. If you'll notice, England, and usually when we talk about England, we're really just talking about the whole group of islands here with Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, called the UK. Anyway, don't want to confuse you. England is an island, so they don't get invaded a lot because, you know, an island surrounded by water. Well, France does invade England, all right? When France invades England, they're actually very able to take over England and defeat the English. That's a really cool story that I'm oversimplifying, but as is being a history teacher of teaching world history. France wins, all right? The Normans beat the Saxons, and now France controls England. Here's what happened, and this is fundamentally important. So they were very different cultures, the Saxons and the Normans, the French and the English, right? Very different cultures. When the French people, right, the Normans, when they take over England, they now live in England. And there's just a small group of French people who own England that run it on a day-to-day basis. Over the course of 200 years, after they win, when you have a really small group of French people with a French culture surrounded by a whole different English culture, the two cultures start merging together. England is going to drastically change because they got taken over by France. France had some good ideas. England had some good ideas. They merged together in England to make England a very strong country. And we're going to talk about some of these cultural changes that happen right here that is going to fundamentally change England and make England one of the strongest countries on earth because they're able to pick and choose and take the best options from multiple cultures to create a very, very strong culture. So the question here is going to be, why did the Battle of Hastings, even though England lost, how does it actually benefit England over a long period of time? It's because once the French took over England, they brought a whole bunch of cool French stuff into French society to add to the already cool stuff that existed in English society. So they are able to pick and choose the best parts of each culture to merge them together and make one very effective and powerful country for a long time to come. And we're going to talk about here some of the things that got picked up from France and developed here in England. All right. All right. So, boop, 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 boop. This is a map, if we had time, which we did in world history, of going through and how the Battle of Hastings worked. I think I'm up here, and I'm blocking that the Normans defeated the Saxons. That's a little part up there. Just hopefully at some point you take college classes. Super cool how the Normans went in and beat the Saxons. All right. So the question here, how did the conquest of England by France at the Battle of Hastings actually benefit England in the long run? We've already discussed that. All right. So these are very influential things that's going to take place in England, and it will eventually spread through other parts of Europe. So because England got taken over by France, they're going to take pieces of French culture, put them in English culture, and you're going to get to, some of these situations here. Like common law. Common law, the official definition here is laws that are the same or common for all people. These laws are the basis for laws in most English-speaking countries, including the United States. Common law is basic. I guess the easiest way to look at it, and this is not what they meant by it, but it's like a common sense laws. Like, depending on the harshness of the crime, there should be a harshness of the punishment. And it's hard to just say, hey, this guy killed somebody, he should die. Like, that's how a lot of the various laws have worked in the past. What if you accidentally kill somebody, right? Or you were trying to help them and they died. If you're still responsible for their death, even if you were trying your hardest to save their life, does that mean you get executed too? These were issues that had happened throughout the Roman Empire and things like that. And people don't really know how to handle these really complex court cases. Well, England creates common law. In large part, it means one of the biggest, most effective things is you have a trial by a jury of your peers, people in the same rank as you. So every individual situation gets presented to a jury, and they decide what the outcome is going to be. The fact that each individual case is looked at on its own merits really makes for a very, very fair and effective legal system. When people feel like they're being treated fairly, all right, with codification of laws and things like that, when people feel like they're being treated fairly, it makes for a very effective country that lasts a really long time. Another big thing that happens is Gothic architecture. All right, so I got a picture here. This is Gothic architecture. Very, very common in England at the time. Usually these huge arches, these stained glass windows. Like, you got some stained glass windows over here. All right, you have these big arches, you got gargoyles, you got this big imposing type of architecture. Now, most of this architecture, and all three of these, what type of buildings are these? Churches. The church has a ton of power. Again, in Europe, whether you're French, whether you're English, you're all Christian. All right. Now, here, if you remember from previous lessons, who's in charge of all Christians? It's the Pope. Doesn't matter if you're in England or France. There's not like each country has their own Pope. Everybody follows the same Pope, who lives still at this point. And when I say to this point, present day, there's still a Pope over the Catholic Church. And at the time, all Christians were in the Catholic Church. That's not the case today, but the Catholic Church follows the Pope, who is in Rome. All right, so we're going to talk about that story here in a minute, about how that causes some really cool situations. But, so this is Gothic architecture, very, very common at the time period. All right, other stuff, growth of towns start coming out. Again, having common law and having an effective legal system where people feel like you're treated fairly, society really takes off. Growth of towns, you start having merchants, people who can go out and I'll play on stereotypes. You think medieval knights and stuff. There's a guy that's got to make all the armor for knights and armorer, right? People pay him a lot of money if he's good at it. Well, he's not going to be a serf, but he may not be a nobility. He might just be really skilled. So all of a sudden, this guy has money to buy pretty much whatever he wants. I mean, they don't have yachts and stuff at the time, but he's not super like wealth. He doesn't own a bunch of land or anything. So what do you call people who have money and they can buy horses and stuff and they can buy their own food? They don't have to work every day building food. They have a skill. People, they're respected. When they say something, people listen because, this is a very famous armorer. Everybody needs this guy. Call that growing group of people. They're called the bourgeoisie class. All right. And it's the rise of the middle class here, like artisans, weavers, bankers, what we would kind of call the middle class today. So you start for the very first time, start seeing this growth of not serfs, but people that are a little higher than that. All right. So 24, in common law society, legal disputes are usually decided by juries. Why are juries an effective and fair way of dealing with issues? We've already discussed this, but think about it. What fairer way than you don't have some rich king deciding you're going to get beheaded because you're trying to save somebody from drowning. They drowned anyway. All right. Now you have people, if you're a serf, it's other serfs that are on these juries that are listening to you and seeing what should your punishment be if there's even a crime committed, as opposed to just having some lord somewhere that doesn't know anything about you making these decisions. All right. The Magna Carta. There are multiple questions on your test on this. All right. So the Magna Carta, got to stay with me, extremely important. Probably one of the more important things of this entire time period, if not the single most important thing. Give or to anything within 200 years of when this happened, this is the single most important thing on the short list of most important things to make sure students know during world history. This is on the top 10 list, the Magna Carta. This is the beginning of people getting rights. Remember, nobody has rights. There's a king. Everybody serves a king in some way or shape or form. The Magna Carta, I'm going to get ready to tell you a really cool story, is going to lead to the first time that people start gaining rights. All right. So I got a picture here. Let me show you this beautiful human being. This is Pope Innocent III. Where does he live? Oh, I can hear you. You all said Rome and you're all correct. What's he in charge of? Christians. All right. There's only one church at the time. There's the Catholic Church, and he's in charge of it. Doesn't matter what country that you live in. You go to church, you pay an offering. That offering, some of it goes to the Pope, and the Pope basically is viewed as they don't view the Pope as a god. All right. But they do feel like the Pope is somebody who can actually talk to God, actually knows what God wants and is doing God's will here. All right. The Pope has the ability, all right, to keep people from going to heaven or letting people go to heaven. All right. So if the Pope doesn't like you, all right, now I would say the Pope can't execute you. If the Pope wanted to execute you, he probably can. All right. However, there's actually something worse than being executed. You're like, torture? No, not talking about that. The reason that the Pope doesn't necessarily think death is the worst thing that can happen, because if you're a devout Christian and you die, you get to go to heaven. All right. So if the Pope really gets mad at you, all right, what he can do is he can excommunicate you. He can kick you out of the church, which in the Christian belief system under the Roman Catholic Church is what he's in charge of. If you're not part of the church, if they've revoked your membership, you can never go to heaven. So the worst thing that can happen, more than being executed, is being kicked out of the church. And people are terrified of this. If you get kicked out of the church, not only does your existence here not matter because you're a serf, your existence in the afterlife is useless. All right. So Pope Innocent III, he just comes out one day and says, I am more powerful than any king. Kings are only over individual countries. I, as the Pope, and over all Christians, therefore over all countries. All right. And he just, for some unnecessary reason, just claims he is more powerful than kings. Guess who's not going to like that? That's right. Kings. Kings are like, nah, that's bull. He's definitely not more powerful than me. specifically the King of England at the time. All right. So we're at this point, we're about 150 years after the Battle of Hastings. All right. The King of England is King John. All right. King John says, no, you ain't. You ain't stronger than me. You ain't coming in my country telling me what to do. You don't even have an army. Not going to do anything. So Pope Innocent III is like, oh, you don't think I got any power, do you? You will bow to me. And they're like, no, I'm not. And he's like, here we go. And Pope Innocent III excommunicates King John. Kicks him out of the church. Now, King John's like, whatever. I don't really believe in all that anyway. I say I do. He's a politician as well. He's like, I don't care anything about that. And then Pope's like, oh, no, I didn't just excommunicate you. I kicked out the entire country of England from the church. The entire country of England is going to hell when they die unless you, King John, acknowledge that I, Pope Innocent III, am more superior to you. This is a game changer in world history, and here's why. When the entire country of England finds out, all the serfs, all the poor people, that they just got kicked out of the church because their king won't admit the Pope's more powerful than him, who do you think the serfs side with? They're going to side with the Pope, the guy that can control their afterlife, all right? This is huge, right? Like, I can't this has never really happened at this point of these big countries in the Middle Ages. Serfs just go to work and do the work every day. When they find out that they're going to hell because their king is too prideful, they straight bow up and storm his castle. I'm figuratively speaking here, but they storm his, really not that figuratively. They storm his castle and they take him hostage, right? The people, the people have revolted. All right, and they're going to hold a figurative gun to his head, to King John's head. There are no guns at the time, so I'm saying figuratively. But the nobles and the serfs, everybody binds together to team up against King John. They force King John to sit down, and they're going to tell him, you are going to acknowledge that Pope Innocent III is stronger than you. This is a drawing of his own people bowing up to King John. This is King John sitting down here, and they're like, here's what's going to happen now. You're going to sign this piece of paper, and this piece of paper is a super famous piece of paper called the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta says the king does not have the right to do crazy stuff to his people. The king doesn't have a right to send everybody to hell. That's basically what he's doing here by not acknowledging the power of the Pope. They say, when you choose to put everybody's life at risk for your own pride, that's wrong. You no longer have the right to do that. As a king, now you get to still be king from now on, because they're not going to go kill him, but the king's responsibility is to look out for the people. And if he's not doing that, the people have a right to bow up to him. Figuratively, all right? So it's not as clean cut as you would like it to be in present day. But serfs and nobility have never bowed up to a king. Not only that, who did they just take power from by saying he can't do something? The king. There's now limits on King John's power. This is crazy. So when the king loses power, who is gaining power? The people. For the first time ever, the people are gaining the power, and this is a fundamental shift in society when King John has to acknowledge his limits. So he signs the Magna Carta. That's what this picture is. And then, guess what he does? This is King John. This is supposed to be the Pope. There's a bunch of different drawings. I don't know how this actually worked out in real life. Oh, he's like, you were right, Pope. And the reason he bowed down to the Pope was not because the Pope terrified him. His own people did. From this point on, the Magna Carta, again, crazy important in the history of the world. For the first time, poor people are starting to realize, guess who actually has all the power? The poor people. If the poor people don't want something to happen, it ain't going to happen. If the whole society binds together and says, we ain't doing this, guess what? They don't do it. This is a pivotal change in society, and the Magna Carta absolutely is probably one of the most, if not the most important document, because from this point on, when governments really start mistreating their people, the people start bowing up to the government, and the government gives in to the people. This is the first time that people have stood up to their government and won and had legit lasting changes by this. So the Magna Carta is that King John's going to lose some power and the people are going to gain power. Now, how much power did King John actually lose? A little bit. How much did the people gain? Not a lot. However, the fact that you're losing power at the top and gaining power on the bottom is really going to start changing throughout history the power structure of who makes the decisions in society up to what we are present day, where we are a democratic republic and the people have a huge say-so in how society goes. And it all starts with the Magna Carta in England in 1200. So that's the question here. The Magna Carta is incredibly important because it's the first time a power check was put on a king. Why is this so important in history? We just got done talking about that. And who gained power from the Magna Carta? And we got done talking about that. All right, so answer that and then move on to the next section of the lesson. See you guys tomorrow.